Number 5. Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the codename for the study of unidentified flying objects, run by the U.S. Air Force from March of 1947 to December 1969. The project was located at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, USA. It was initially designed by Captain Edward J. Ruffel and was inspired by other projects like it. Blue Book's goals were to determine if UAP were a threat to national security and to analyze UFO-related data. There were thousands of reports that they analyzed, researched, investigated, and documented. But they thought it would be unlikely that studying UFOs would lead to any major scientific breaks. So the US government decided to terminate the project in 1969 for several reasons. Their first reason for the project's termination were that no UAP that had been investigated, reported, or evaluated displayed a threat to national security. Second, there was no UAP discovered that demonstrated a truly unknown or unidentified non-human technological advancement beyond what we already know. And finally, there was no evidence that indicated any of the sightings that were reported as unidentified were extraterrestrial. Over their 22-year run, Project Blue Book received over 12,500 sightings and reports, but none of them were actual unidentified phenomena. I actually have a video on a lot of phenomena that were mistaken for UFOs, so if you want to check that out, click Top 5 Sky Phenomena. It's pretty cool. But back to Project Blue Book. The project received a lot of backlash from the government, who believed that the speculation and theories surrounding UAP should be debunked and not researched. They reasoned that every sighting that had been reported was just people mistaking natural phenomena or military training. The project was taking a lot of money and was not providing any useful information. The financial loss that this project became, mixed with the doubt that UAP even existed, pushed the government to decide that Project Blue Book was unnecessary, so they shut it down. Project Blue Book has since made itself well known within pop culture, being mentioned in TV shows and in UAP enthusiasts. It was one of the most popular US government research projects centered around UAP, so it makes sense that it gained so much traction and popularity. Have you heard about Project Blue Book? Number 4. Project Magnet. Project Magnet was a Canadian study program founded by Transport Canada in December of 1950 and directed by Wilbur Brockhouse Smith. Smith was a senior radio engineer for Transport Canada's broadcast and measurements section. It was government funded and approved until 1954, but the program officially shut down when Smith passed in 1962. Smith's founding theory surrounded extraterrestrial UAP being operated by magnetism, opposed to electricity or any other worldly power source. The project began when Smith requested to use the facilities of the Department of Transportation to study UAP. The project was officially approved and government-backed on the 2nd of December. Smith hoped he would be able to collect data on UAP. The program hoped that the data studied would lead to scientific advancements on practical engineering and technology. Mainly, they believed that the project would provide them insight on geomagnetism and Earth's magnetic field, hoping that this insight would then be applied to vehicles as a source of propulsion. Project Magnet theorized that UAP, if they were real, would hold the technology necessary to make their vision a reality. Only 2 years into the project, Smith made a preemptive statement, theorizing that UAP came from intelligent, non-human sources, and definitely used magnetism for flight. In the same year, the Canadian government established a second UAP research program, again with Smith being the lead director. Smith did end up going a little bit off the goal within a couple of years. He began to share his theories that were far more outlandish than the magnetism manipulation for flight. He believed UAP were linked to psychic phenomena and said that he himself was in telepathic communication with extraterrestrial beings. He wrote a series of articles surrounding the theory, which weren't very well received by his employers, and they weren't even released to the public until 7 years after Smith's passing. When the project was pulled from the government funding in 1954, Smith built an observatory outside of Ottawa on Shirley's Bay to continue studying UAP reports and sightings, still believing that UAP would provide data that could be understood and measured by our technology, and then be implemented, leading to advancements. Though a lot of people challenged his hypothesis that magnetism could be implemented, it is a really interesting theory, so for a second, you have to let me ramble on how it would work. The Earth is essentially one big magnet, and the magnet has different strengths depending on geographical location. Smith assumed that advanced life forms had discovered a way to accurately accurately manipulate these fields and use them as a method of fast-moving travel. Which, as far as a lot of non-human tech theories go, it's not too outlandish. Like, think about how fast bullet trains are able to travel, just by using physical magnets. If Smith was able to discover the technology that allowed geomagnetic propulsion to be implemented in air travel, it would have been extraordinary. Transportation would never be so incredibly advanced, effective, and far more ecologically responsible. Okay, I'm done with the scientific endeavor. Back to government secrets. Number 3. Institute 22. Institute 22 was a Soviet Union located organization founded by the Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense. Its main goal was to investigate UAP sightings that were reported in the Soviet Union. It was a top-secret, government-backed program that ran for 13 years until the Soviet Union was abolished. Soldiers, sailors, and pilots of the Soviet Army were directed to focus efforts on spotting UAP and other unexplained phenomena. Since the program was supported by the Ministry of Defense, the lack of information provided was never questioned. The government and soldiers were happy to keep a keen eye on the sky. That was a good rhyme. Oh my god. The Institute studied, investigated, and filed over 3,000 reports. They were able to find certain explanations for 90 to 95% of the reports, but 5 to 10% remained unsolved when the Institute was dissolved alongside the Soviet Union. Conspiracies and speculations surrounding Institute 22 are abundant. The most popular theory assumes that Institute 22 was actually a cover-up for nuclear weapons. People believed that the Institute was involved in covering the near launch of a missile located at a Soviet nuclear base. In 1982, one of the Soviets' nuclear bases was mysteriously brought online, and for seemingly no reason, a nuclear missile was prepped and set to launch. The panic lasted less than a minute before the launch was suddenly disconnected and aborted, just as mysteriously as it was engaged. Later on, it was discovered that witnesses had seen UAP activity near the Soviet base, and Institute 22 was involved to assist with the situation, and eventually, the cover-up. The Soviet Union released a statement that explained the UAP as flares being tested at a high altitude, and that the nuclear missile that was brought online was just a simple test. People weren't any happier with the explanation. In fact, it was still as terrifying as UAP. Like, I'm sorry, you were just checking if a military-grade, city-leveling explosive was able to turn off. So you did this test not knowing if the missile was able to be taken offline after being engaged. Girl, yeah. I'd be more scared of that too. Number 2, Project Condign. Project Condign was a secret UAP study led by the Defense Intelligence Staff of the British government. Condign was only present for 3 years, from 1997 to 2000. That's very short, so let's delve into why the project failed so aggressively and so quickly. Project Condign studied over 10,000 sightings and reports that were collected by the section of the Directorate of Scientific and Technical Intelligence, which is a program within the Defense Intelligence Staff. With the information collected, Project Condign created a 400-page document named Unidentified Aerial Phenomena in the UK Air Defence Region. Okay, I feel like that's not a very creative title. Direct, but it sounds like a book that would go directly into the pile of books I convinced myself I'm going to read, but will definitely end up getting utilized as a disposable coaster or napkins. The report laid out the entirety of Project Condign's research, hypotheses, and overall conclusions. It concluded that UAP were an indisputable presence, but that no evidence supported the idea of them being hostile, dangerous, or threatening to the safety of citizens. The majority of UAP sightings that were analyzed and explained by Project Condign were labeled as misidentifications of common objects, while the unsolved reports were likely the result of unknown supernormal astronomical phenomena that is not yet understood by modern science. That's dumb, and I could have concluded that, and I don't even have my high school diploma. Isn't the point of a research to find answers? Like, yeah, you're right. The strange floating light that randomly appeared could be a space rock, but it could also not be. Isn't the point of founding a phenomena identification study identifying and classifying phenomena? It's not just saying, oh, yeah, after intense research and thousands of tax dollars worth of resources, I've come to the revolutionary conclusion that what was spotted is in fact, without a doubt, something that I can't identify. Okay, sorry, I'm distractible. Some of the scientists actually did decide to put their thinking caps on and were able to begin the classification of a strange astral phenomenon, referred to as point plasma formation, which is apparently similar to a lightning ball. The electromagnetic fields generated by plasma are assumed to explain reports of close encounters because of perceptual alterations or illusions. The report suggests that further research into the phenomena should be implemented. I thought that was your job. No. Sorry, I actually already explained how clearly it's not. The report continues to talk about how their research figured out nothing about the plasma phenomena, but notes that former Soviet Union scientists identified a close connection between the phenomena and plasma technologies, and they were pursuing related techniques for potential military purposes. I find it so funny that no one even knew what the phenomena was, but in a beautifully inept display of human nature, they went, I wonder how we could hurt people with that. Number 1. Project Sign and Grudge. Project Sign was an official government-backed and funded US study of UAP, led by the United States Air Force, and was active for under 12 months in 1948. The project was founded by General Nathan Farragut Twining, head of the Air Technical Service Command. The objective of the project was to collect, evaluate, and inform the government of all UAP-related sightings, hoping to identify any UAP that were a national concern. The project was dissolved quickly, not even reaching a new calendar year. After the dissolution of Project Sign, Edward J. Ruppelt, Project Blue Book's director, supposedly said that Project Sign had created an estimate of the overall situation, which supported an interplanetary explanation for UAP, and that the chief staff of the Air Forces shut down Project Sign for lack of proof. However, there is no proof that Ruppelt ever made these claims, and many have called the apparent quote more mythological than real. But the same year, the US Air Force released a paper which stated that although some UAP resembled actual aircrafts, there was not enough data to soundly determine their origin. Nearly all reports were explained as originating from ordinary cases, but they did suggest further research into the investigation and classifications of sightings. The curiosity and support from the government to conduct more research, combined with the fear of UAP being exploited by a foreign power, resulted in the establishment of Project Grudge. Since it was post-World War II, panic and stress in government and citizens was high, so manipulating a population into a terrified mob was pretty easy. But in the same political vein, Project Grudge was urged to release a public report containing 4 explanations and classifications for UAP sightings. So, because politics is above everything, Project Grudge fabricated a statement alerting citizens of the 4 UAP sighting explanations. UAP reports could be explained as misidentifications of various conventional objects, mass hysteria and warners, individuals who fabricated reports as a host or to seek publicity, or a psychopathological person. I will say, it sucks when science is halted by politics, because it leads to research being placed second to public opinions or outrage from people who don't even understand the research. Governments will create giant cover-ups and secrets to ease the public's panic, but I think that there's a method they haven't tried yet. Literally just telling the truth and being transparent. And some people will say, oh my god, no, because everyone will panic if you tell them the truth. No, I really don't think people will, because when left in the dark, people actually make up theories that are far scarier than reality. And if the truth is actually that bad, then people should know. So yeah, maybe I'm just not a fan of the government. No, actually no, I'm not. I vote for anarchy, honestly. Number 5, Carlsbad. In August of 2022, a group of people reported an inexplicable glowing object illuminating the sky above them. They claimed to see red dots appearing, disappearing, and reappearing in the formation of a line. The group quickly took out their phones and began recording, then noticing a second and third formation of the same dotted lines. In response to the public questioning of this sighting, the National Air Force released a statement claiming that this was simply part of their training and that there was no cause for concern. They said that the dots were training operations from the Holloman Air Force Base, in which the pilots and planes were using flares. Many citizens questioned the legitimacy of the Air Force's response, stating that the lights simply do not look like flares, they look electronic. The National UFO Center released a quote that got people thinking. The greatest scientific question of our time is, are we alone? From this vantage point, it doesn't look like we are. People that are skeptical of the Air Force's honesty bring up an interesting observation. When one person captures a video of an unidentified aerial phenomenon, the Air Force reports it as tampered or photoshopped. But whenever the video is taken by multiple people from multiple angles, the Air Force creates an excuse, citing tests or astral anomalies as the reasoning behind the flying objects. Many find the responses to be odd, wondering why no one is alerted of testing beforehand. The Air Force continues to come up with explanations after the videos are brought to their attention. Is it just as naive to believe in UFOs as it is to blindly believe the organization that has lied to us in the past? Number 4. Roswell. The Roswell incident is generously and fairly credited as a pivoting point for the culture surrounding aerial phenomenons today. In 1947, an object crash landed on ranch land in Roswell, New Mexico. Mac Brazel and his son were driving across their land when they came across the wreckage. Brazel described the scene as a large area of bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tinfoil, and rather tough paper and sticks. Perplexed by the strange assortment of items that had randomly appeared, Brazel decided to take the items into the police. The object that crashed had several crash sites. Others who claim to have seen the object crash land in different locations say that they saw small humanoid creatures leaving the ship, seemingly running away from the wreckage. About a week after the crash, Brazel had been able to collect most of the wreckage, so he drove into Roswell. Brazel brought the items to Sheriff George Wilcox, who ended up being just as confused as Brazel was regarding the origin of the materials. The sheriff decided to contact the commander of Roswell Army's Air Forces. The news worked itself up the chain of command, eventually reaching an intelligence officer named Major Jesse Marcel. Marcel traveled to the crash sites and retrieved the remainder of the wreckage. Then, Marcel provided a public statement for the newspapers. The intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field has come into the possession of a flying saucer. Pilot Kenneth Arnold also confirmed the existence of the saucer, claiming that he too had seen a flying object. Only days later, the news ran rampant with flying saucer headlines. The Air Force released a statement claiming that the object was merely a weather balloon, but in 1978, Marcel revealed that the claim of it being a weather balloon was a hoax meant to distract the public. He speculated that the debris' origin was not of this world. Public speculation exploded with hundreds of theories as to what was found that day, and to this day, the Air Force continues to deny that the debris was extraterrestrial. New theories regarding the Roswell incident continue to be talked about, making it one of, if not the most popular UFO sighting to date. Number 3. Pilot sightings. On Sunday, February 21st, 2021, Steve Douglas, a blogger armed with a radio, accidentally intercepted a transmission from an airplane flying over New Mexico, and he heard a startling interaction take place. The first pilot said, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us," which was followed shortly by a description from the pilot. "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type thing, moving really fast right over the top of us." Douglas was able to use 2 flight tracking apps to pinpoint the exact position of the plane as the signal was intercepted. Douglas said that it was over the northeast corner of New Mexico, west of Clayton, New Mexico. The plane was at an altitude of 37,000 feet. New Mexico is very well known for its connection to the extraterrestrial, making the sighting of an unidentified object far more likely and suspicious. In response to the blogger's post, the FAA released a statement confirming that the audio was real, but that their radars did not pick up any unknown flying objects over the area. Pilot sighting strange flying objects supposedly happens fairly regularly, and there are many similar cases of pilots seeing objects flying over them or in the distance. But then, the command tower claims that there's no sign of anything on the radar. The Air Force has been extremely secretive in the past, adamantly denying the accusation that they're aware of an extraterrestrial life force. But in recent years, they've been denying less and avoiding more. Do you think it's because they can no longer hide it? Or possibly, extraterrestrial life isn't as harmful as we once believed? Number 2. The Lonnie Zamora incident. In the spring of 1964, Lonnie Zamora claims to have seen 2 people standing beside a large, shiny object that later launched into the air with a roaring burst of fire. Lonnie gained a significant amount of attention from the media, UFO organization and investigators, and the Air Force. Lonnie Zamora found himself in an open field after seeing what he'd assumed to be a motor crash from the distance. Zamora continued pursuing the crash until he saw a blaze of fire. Zamora then assumed that an explosion had occurred, so he decided to investigate the incident from a distance. It was then that Lonnie noticed a white shiny object, originally assumed to be an overturned white car. He described the object being oval and likened the material to aluminum. Many theories have been provided in an attempt to explain what Lonnie saw that night. Some said it was merely a mirage of the star Canopus. Others suggested that it was a lunar landing test by humans, not aliens. The president of New Mexico Tech claimed that it was just a prank put on by some of the students, saying it was just a balloon and a candle, not high-tech alien equipment. In 1966, the county's commerce president decided to make the location more accessible to tourists. They installed walkways and signage, hoping to attract alien enthusiasts from all over the country. But the tourist destination is actually not placed at the exact site. In fact, it's about a quarter-mile away. Locals claim the decision to move the pathways was simply due to radioactivity on the original site. Number 1. The Dulce Base. Are aliens and humans working together? In Dulce, New Mexico, this might be a reality. Many people believe that there's a secret underground base where extraterrestrial beings and humans work together, working on projects and researching what lies beyond the stars and what's on our planet. The theory was created in 1979 when Paul Benowitz became convinced that he was intercepting signals from alien spacecrafts. Within the same year, he had also become convinced that he had discovered a secret government underground base where gray aliens worked alongside humans. Benowitz's story spread quickly and became highly popular in the UFO conspiracy community, with members of UFO groups even confirming the existence of the base. News outlets began adding fuel to the raging fire, claiming that an author had confirmed the existence of the base and that the aliens built the base so that they could test on humans. A political scientist named Michael Barkin added that there are in fact underground missile installations, which gives the slightest amount of plausibility to the idea of an alien base. This stirred up even more interest in the theory among UFO conspiracists. However, absurd claims of wild fights and abductions of humans led many to believe that the base is nothing more than a conspiracy. The evidence supporting the base existing is circumstantial, but the evidence against it is as well. Whether a secret collaborative project between aliens and humans is happening or not, there's definitely something strange lurking underground at the Dulce base.
Number 5. Fire in the Sky. Based on the book The Walton Experience by Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky is set in 1975 and follows a logger named, Travis Walton, played by D.B. Sweeney from Arizona, who allegedly had a flying saucer experience that caused him to abruptly vanish for 5 days. His co-workers experienced mockery and disdain while being falsely charged with, killing. But allow me to back up and elaborate on the real story. Back in 1975, a forestry worker named, Travis Walton, was working in the area of Snowflake, Arizona, when a saucer-shaped craft with a high-pitched buzz entered their field of vision. Quick sidebar, the irony of a place in a hot state like Arizona being called Snowflake is hilarious to me. So Walton says that after he left the truck and approached the object, a beam of light suddenly appeared from the craft and knocked him unconscious. The other 6 men on the project were supposedly frightened and drove away. Walton says that he awoke in a hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures. He says that he fought with them until a human wearing a helmet led him to another room, where he blacked out as 3 other humans put a clear plastic mask over his face. Now, Walton has said that he remembers nothing else until he found himself walking along a highway 5 days later with the flying saucer departing above him. So, on that same day, he appeared in town in a phone booth, surprising his employees who had fled, believing him to be dead. He alleges that extraterrestrials abducted him and examined him in that space that resembled that hospital. In the days following his UFO claim, the National Enquirer awarded Walton and his co-workers a $5,000 prize for Best UFO Case of the Year, after they were said to have passed polygraph tests administered by the Enquirer and the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, or APRO for short. You know how much I like my short forms. Walton, his older brother, and his mother were described by the Navajo County, Arizona sheriff as longtime students of UFOs. According to experts, all of the co-workers who weren't there, who saw the spacecraft, all took polygraph tests and all passed, except for one that was inconclusive. But you know what happens. It's a good ratio though. So in 1978, Walton wrote his book, with the same title as the movie, detailing his claims, which became the basis for Fire in the Sky. Paramount Pictures decided that his account was too fuzzy and too similar to other televised close encounters, so they ordered a screenwriter to write a flashier, more provocative abduction story. Fire in the Sky grossed $19.9 million domestically on a $15 million budget and received mixed reviews. It was nominated though for 4 Saturn Awards, so that's pretty cool. Nevertheless, its alien abduction scenes are considered by many to be highly effective. In 2017, Pace named Fire in the Sky as one of the 25 best science fiction films on Netflix. I know what I'm watching tonight. Number 4. Hangar 10. So the Rendlesham UFO incident, which was released in the US as Hangar 10, is a 2014 found footage style British horror film directed by Daniel Simpson. It stars Danny Shaler, Abby Salt, and Robert Curtis as 3 friends who become lost in the Rendlesham forest and discover evidence of UFO activity, decades after the original incident. It premiered at the Colchester Film Festival on the 22nd of October in 2014 and was released in the UK on February 9th of 2015. But before we get to the movie stuff, let's talk about the real story. So the Rendlesham Forest incident was a series of reported sightings of unexplained lights near the forest in Suffolk, England in December of 1980, which became linked with UFO landings. Now these events occurred just outside RAF Woodbridge, which was used at the time by the United States Air Force, or USAF for short. USAF personnel, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, claimed to see things they described as UFOs. The occurrence is the most famous of UFO events to have ever happened in the United Kingdom, and is among the best known reported UFO events worldwide, sometimes called Britain's Roswell. The UK Ministry of Defence has stated that the event posed no threat to national security, so it was never investigated as a security matter. But what do they know that we don't? At around 3 a.m. on December 26th of 1980, good old Boxing Day, a security patrol near the east gate of RAF Woodbridge saw lights apparently descending into the forest, and initially thought it was a downed aircraft. According to a memo, upon entering the forest to investigate, the servicemen witnessed a glowing object that was metallic in appearance with, colored lights. As they attempted to approach the object, it appeared to move through the trees, and the animals on a nearby farm went into quite the frenzy. One of the servicemen, Sergeant Jim Peniston, later claimed to have encountered a craft of unknown origin while in the forest, but never elaborated on the details. Shortly after 4, the local police were called to the scene, but reported that the only lights they could see were those from the Orford Ness Lighthouse, many miles away on the coast. After daybreak on that same morning, servicemen returned to a small clearing near the eastern edge of the forest and found 3 small impressions on the ground in a triangular pattern, as well as burn marks and broken branches on nearby trees. At 10:30, the local police were called out yet again, this time to see the impressions, which, they originally thought could have been made by an animal. Not any animal I know. The Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the one I mentioned before, visited the site with several servicemen in the early hours, taking radiation readings in the triangle of depressions and in the surrounding area using an AN-PDR-27, which is apparently a standard US military radiation survey meter. Although they recorded 0.07 millirochengens per hour, in other regions they detected 0.03 to 0.04, and which is around the background level. I'm not saying that word again. Furthermore, they detected a similar small burst for half a mile away from the landing site. It was during this investigation that a flashing light was seen across a field to the east, almost in line with a farmhouse, as the witnesses had seen on the first night. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. Later, according to Halt's memo, 3 star-like lights were seen in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south, about 10 degrees above the horizon. He said that the brightest of these hovered for 2 to 3 hours and seemed to beam down a stream of light from time to time. So, let's get to the movie version. 33 years after the incident, 3 metal detector enthusiasts hunting for Saxon gold in the same region capture incredible footage of UFOs while filming their expedition. In classic horror movie tropes, their UFO detecting equipment fails, and they meet some pretty scary UFOs. The movie isn't well rated, but I never promised Hollywood blockbusters. Now did I? Number 3, Phoenix Forgotten. So this is a 2017 American found footage science fiction horror film directed by Justin Barber in his directorial debut, and written by Barber and T.S. Nowlin. The film was also produced by Nowlin alongside Ridley Scott, Wes Ball, Courtney Solomon, and Mark Canton. Originally advertised as Phoenix, the film tells the story of the disappearance of 3 teenagers who set out to find the source of the widely reported 1997 UFO phenomenon known as the Phoenix Lights. It was released on April 21st of 2017 to some negative reviews, with many critics unfavorably comparing it to the Blair Witch Project. So, what really happened in real life? On March 13th of 1997, at 7:55 p.m. MST, a witness in Henderson, Nevada, reported seeing a large, V-shaped object traveling southeast. At 8:15 p.m., an unidentified former police officer in Paulden, Arizona, reported seeing a cluster of reddish-orange lights disappear over the southern horizon. Shortly afterwards, there were reports of lights seen over the Prescott Valley in Arizona. Tim Lay and his wife Bobby, his son Hal, and his grandson Damien first saw the lights when they were about 105 kilometers away from them. At first, the lights appeared to them as 5 separate and distinct lights in like an arc shape, as if they were on top of a balloon, but they soon realized the lights appeared to be moving towards them. So over the next 10 or so minutes, the lights appeared to come closer. The distance between the lights increased, eventually taking on the shape of an upside-down V. Eventually, when the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away, family said that they could make out a shape that looked like a 60-degree carpenter's square. I'm not even gonna try with that one. With 5 lights set into it, with 1 at the front and 2 on each side. Soon the object with the embedded lights appeared to be moving towards them, at about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly that it gave the appearance of a silent hovering object, which seemed to pass over their heads and went through a V opening in the peaks of the mountain range towards a nearby mountain and also towards the direction of the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Between 8:30 and 8:45 p.m., witnesses in Glendale, which is northwest of Phoenix, saw the light formation pass overhead at an altitude high enough to become obscured by the thin clouds. stars. Amateur astronomer Mitch Stanley in Scottsdale, Arizona, also observed the high-altitude lights flying in formation through a telescope, and according to him, they were quite clearly individual airplanes. At approximately 10 p.m. that same evening, a large number of folks in the Phoenix area reported seeing a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. A number of photos and videos were taken, prompting author Robert Schaefer to describe it as possibly the most widely witnessed UFO event in history. Number 2. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The movie depicts the tale of Roy Neary, played by Richard Dreyfuss, a common blue-collar worker from Indiana, whose life changes as a result of coming into contact with an alien craft. In another parallel story, the team follows a team of study experts with diverse backgrounds looking at the odd appearance of objects in remote places, mainly desert areas. So Close Encounters of the Third Kind genuinely draws inspiration from several different sources, including real people's encounters with UFOs, unlike the other movies on today's list that are based on a single event. Director Steven Spielberg hired Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a distinguished astronomer who created the UFO classification system from which the movie gets its name, to accurately portray the UFO sightings. So Hynek acted as scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the US Air Force under 3 projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and the very well-known Project Blue Book. If you don't know it, I recommend looking it up, it's fascinating. So his classification for UFO sightings, according to increasing proximity, starts with nocturnal lights, which is pretty straightforward, simply lights in the night sky, and then it escalates to daylight discs, which are UFOs seen in the daytime and generally have disc or oval shapes. Next up, we've got radar visual. These are the UFO reports that have radar confirmation, offering harder evidence that the objects are real. Although I have to admit that radar propagation can be occasionally discredited due to atmospheric propagation anomalies. Now for the fun stuff. Close Encounters of the First Kind, which are visual sightings of an unidentified flying object seemingly less than 500 feet away that show an appreciable angular extension and considerable detail. This is followed by Close Encounters of the Second Kind, a UFO event in which a physical effect is alleged. This can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, animals reacting, a physiological effect such as paralysis or heat and discomfort in the witness, or some physical trace like impressions in the ground, scorched or otherwise affected vegetation, or a chemical trace. Finally, we have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which are UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of a UFO. Number 1. Bad Los Angeles. This movie tells the story of a global extraterrestrial invasion as witnessed by a Marine platoon attempting to defend Los Angeles. So the battalion has to fight its way out of the city as it is being looted by aliens because things don't go as planned by either party. The film story was partially inspired by the Battle of Los Angeles, which was a rumored enemy attack and subsequent anti-aircraft artillery barrage that took place in, LA during World War II on the night of February 24th of 1942. The incident occurred a day after the bombardment of Elwood, when an Imperial Japanese submarine launched shells at US aviation fuel tanks. West Coast tensions were already running high in the months after the December 1941 Pearl Harbor attack and entry of the US into the Second World War. Eyewitnesses and radar data reported an unknown aerial craft over the LA area on February 24th, leading to fears of a Japanese attack on the US mainland. But a review of the incident found no proof of Japanese presence in the area and attributed the incident to aliens. This very real incident was used as the main focus of an early teaser trailer to promote the film, in which it strongly implied that the alien invaders spent decades planning their attack and invasion. The filmmakers drew upon this historical event in an attempt to help ground the film in reality and to make it, as scary as possible.
Number 5. A Christmas Abduction. Our first tale comes from a woman who claims that one Christmas day she did not receive her 2 front teeth or a hippopotamus, but was instead abducted by beings from another world. This is her story. I saw a UFO in 1978 on Christmas Day. My mom and dad saw it also. I was so excited as a 12-year-old child that I went to sleep on the top bunk bed and dreamed that I was being lifted up on a craft. My body couldn't move as I was being lifted in a force field. Upon entering the craft, I could feel my body begin to move again. I was covering my eyes and I felt 2 taps on my shoulder. I turned around and it was 3 of them. One was female. She said, "Don't be afraid. We are not going to harm you. We only chose you because we knew you were more curious than afraid." They showed me all around the craft. The floors were made of cushions. They explained that they fly with their mind and manually. I asked if I could fly it. They said that I wouldn't comprehend their technology. I said I could learn. They replied that I would have to erase everything that I learned on Earth first. Then I would have to learn their history and technology. They taught me how to communicate with them with my mind, and how to fast forward psychically. For example, one day we will be communicating with other worlds to help us live longer, and they would teach us how to build a craft that will take us to other planets. It is really too much to write, but just sharing my special dream. I asked them if I will remember this. They said, when I grow up 40 or 50 years later, I will remember this as if it happened yesterday. Every feeling and emotion. She said it's a technology of theirs that's called reverse memory. I never told anyone this story other than my family. I figure I'll share it here. Number 4, the Sacramento abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, in July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento, with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body like I had been given something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, and unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put a tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders do. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks. So small and thin, it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in a chair with my head and jaw held by something, so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there. But then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum in a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up as a screen, like a hologram, but not like the Star Wars kind, more like a video call. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. I've never seen a person that kind of snow-white skin color before. He spoke with a gray person on the holoscreen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. The man was obviously military of some sort, judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holoscreen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain American English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and the next thing I knew, I fell on top of my bed, with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Number 3. Too close encounters, too furious. Next, we have a story from a woman who claims that she was visited by aliens as a child, but not believed. Years later, she had a second encounter that solidified the experience as truth in her mind. As she tells it, "My first experience happened when I was a child, living in a small town in Texas, in a house on a few acres of land for horses and cattle. I wasn't allowed to watch very much television, so I'd never heard of nor seen anything about UFOs or aliens before in my life. Until one night I found myself out in the field standing in front of a spaceship. And there was a being in front of me. Behind it stood the open hatch of a light-filled door. I do not remember how I got there or back inside. I have also forgotten what, if anything, was said or done to me at the time. When I spoke about it, I was reprimanded harshly and told I had an overactive imagination and it was only a dream. When I insisted on repeating my story, I was punished. They demanded to know where I'd seen such a thing, and the little television I was allowed to watch became much smaller, to the point where mentioning what had happened only brought negative consequences. So I stopped talking about it. Despite this, it remains forever in my memory. One night in early 2004, I was home alone at my apartment in Houston, Texas. As usual, I fell asleep on the couch in front of the television. Shortly after drifting off, I awoke in my living room. However, I was now upright, gliding seamlessly across the floor. I looked down, realizing that I was not walking, but instead floating towards my bathroom. Upon this realization, I also recognized that I was not asleep, and was consciously thinking to myself, I am floating. A series of emotions ran through me: confusion, fear, as well as excitement as to what was happening to me. But these feelings were tempered, and although I didn't understand why, I felt helpless to do anything to stop it. The bathroom was cold and dark, visibility possible due to the dim light coming from the plug-in by the sink. Although I have no memory of putting the toilet seat down, I found myself sitting on it, confused. I thought to myself, what am I doing here? As I looked up, there in front of me, what was commonly known as a gray. It was standing, slightly taller than me, as I sat, staring at me stoically with its huge, unblinking eyes. Startled, my regretful reaction was to raise my hand up as if to hit it. My arm was instantly and simultaneously stopped and lowered in a series of short jerks. I immediately thought, it is controlling my body, and shortly thereafter realized that although I should have felt more afraid, I wasn't. I then thought to myself, it has subdued my emotions as well. I felt a little giddy about what was happening. I did not verbally speak, nor did it, but I remember thinking it knew exactly what I was thinking and proceeded with its agenda with astute purpose. I recall getting into the bathtub for some reason, but my memory after that is vague and muddled. I presume this is when it performed whatever experiment or procedure it came to do. When I awoke, I instantly felt a rush of fear and excitement, and also, oddly, a bit sad as well. My memories were indeed confirmed, by the way. I'm a notoriously bad sleeper, and because of a painful back injury, and I never sleep prone, I had real sense of missing time and being a bit groggy. When I went to the bathroom, everything seemed in place, outside of the fact that the shower curtain was not only pulled back completely, but wet as well. Left only with this most vivid memory that I wanted to share, but found often that when I did, it only brought odd silence and strange looks, assurances that it was only a dream. But it was not a dream. Number 2, aliens or sleep paralysis. Next, we have a story of a woman who woke up one night only to begin levitating as aliens attempted to take her away. As she tells it, I had woken up in my bed feeling completely normal, and I wasn't able to move. After I had felt that initial panic, I began to try and move, and it was possible. It was just very difficult. I remember being able to get my knees up to my chest and roll over onto my side and get my feet onto the ground, and I remember being able to feel like the cold floorboards underneath my feet. After that happened, I remember seeing a bright light coming through my window. Everything began to buzz and vibrate, and I could see my bedroom door swing open, and 3 tall black silhouettes kind of floated into my room. I had seen them looking at me from beside my bed. They looked very angry. After that, my jaw had stretched open. Everything was still buzzing and vibrating, and I began to get lifted up towards my ceiling. After that, I remember fighting it really, really hard, because the first thing that came to my mind obviously was, I'm getting abducted by aliens. It was the only thing that made sense to me at that moment, and after I'd gotten lifted up towards my ceiling, I remember my nose touching my ceiling. I got snapped back into bed, and that's where I woke up, feeling extremely nauseous. I ran to my bathroom, throwing up. I had bruises all over my legs and thighs. Number 1. Yet another abduction. For our final entry, we have a video from 2010. The story behind it is that a woman claimed to her husband that aliens were trying to abduct her. Her husband set up a camera, paranormal activity style, to put her mind at ease, and captured this bizarre footage. In the video, the husband is on the left and the wife on the right, sleeping under a duvet. The duvet on the wife's side is lifted up but then falls flat on the bed, giving the appearance that she has vanished. After 12.5 minutes time, the duvet again lifts up very high, and when it settles, the mother is once again visible. They were not able to extract the footage from the infrared camera, so they played the footage on a monitor which they filmed. Does this footage really show a woman being taken by aliens? Or is there some other simpler explanation?
At number 5, Foo Fighters. And no, I don't mean the amazing band led by Dave Grohl, I mean the UFO event witnessed in the early 1940s during World War II. The term Foo Fighters may sound somewhat whimsical and even comical today, but during World War II, it was associated with mysterious and often eerie encounters in the skies. Allied fighter pilots in both the European and Pacific theaters of operations reported seeing unidentified flying objects or strange aerial phenomena that came to be known as Foo Fighters. These encounters were initially perceived as potential enemy secret weapons. The phenomenon known as Foo Fighters was first formally reported in November 1944 by the US 415th Night Fighter Squadron. The term Foo itself has a rather curious origin, stemming from a comic strip called Smokey Stover by cartoonist Bill Holman. In a mission debriefing in late 1944, a radar operator named Donald J. Myers, who had been an avid reader of Smokey Stover, used the term Foo Fighters to describe a red ball of fire that chased an aircraft through high-speed maneuvers. The name stuck, albeit with slight modification for the sake of decency. The sightings of Foo Fighters were not limited to one specific region or time frame. Royal Air Force personnel had reported similar lights following their aircraft as early as March 1942, while American sightings started becoming more common in October of 1944. Pilots described these objects as fast-moving, round, and glowing, often displaying colors like red, white, or orange. Some likened them to Christmas tree lights and noted that they seemed to playfully dance around their aircraft, making sharp turns before disappearing. Strangely, the objects appeared to be intelligently controlled, but never exhibited hostile behavior, and they couldn't be evaded or shot down. The military took these sightings seriously, suspecting that they might be secret German weapons. However, further investigation revealed that German and Japanese pilots had reported similar phenomena. This led to the theory that the Foo Fighters could be an electrostatic phenomena, electromagnetic phenomena, or simply reflections of light from ice crystals. In December 1944, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force in Paris issued a press release describing the Foo Fighters as a new German weapon, which was reported in major newspapers like the New York Times and the British Daily Telegraph. Time magazine also covered the phenomenon in January 1945. The Foo Fighters reported in the Pacific Theater of Operations were slightly different from those in Europe. They were described as large burning spheres that sometimes hung in the sky but occasionally followed aircraft. Speculation suggested a connection to the Japanese fire balloon campaign, but no aircraft were attacked by these objects. After the war, researchers examined Foo Fighter reports, concluding that they didn't pose a threat and proposing that they were in fact private airline flights. However, with several reports of these lights appearing in and throughout the 1940s, I think we can all agree that these things were UFOs. Number 4. Frederick Valentik. The mysterious disappearance of Frederick Valentik on October 21st, 1978 is a chilling tale that blurs the line between the known and the unknown. Valentik, a young pilot from Australia, was flying a small Cessna 182 aircraft over the Bass Strait, a stretch of water between mainland Australia and Tasmania. What should have been an ordinary training flight turned into one of the most perplexing UFO encounters in aviation history. Valentik radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control to report an unidentified flying object tailing his aircraft. He described the craft as having 4 bright lights and said it was orbiting his plane. At one point, he claimed the UFO was not an aircraft and was moving erratically. His last transmission was a frantic plea for assistance, reporting that the mysterious craft was hovering above him and seemed to be playing some sort of game. Shortly after this disturbing transmission, all contact with Frederick Valentik and his aircraft was lost. Despite extensive search efforts, neither Valentik nor any wreckage of his plane was ever found, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. One of the perplexing aspects of this case is Valentik's initial description of the UFO as an aircraft with 4 bright lights. This led some to speculate that he might have mistaken the UFO for a conventional airplane. However, as his encounter continued, his descriptions became increasingly bizarre and inconsistent with typical aircraft behavior. Valentik's sense of unease and the fact that he could not identify the craft's origin or purpose only added to the mystery. The Valentik case remains one of the most puzzling disappearances in aviation history, with theories ranging from UFO abduction to more conventional explanations like navigational errors or mental distress. Regardless of the cause, it serves as a reminder of the vast and enigmatic skies above us, where the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary can blur in an instant, leaving us with unanswered questions and a sense of unease. Number 3. The Great Los Angeles Air Raid. Also known as the Battle of Los Angeles, which occurred on the night of February 24 to 25, 1942, is one of the most iconic and enigmatic events in the history of UFO sightings. This incident took place just a few months after the United States entered World War II, causing heightened heightened tensions along the west coast due to the fear of Japanese attacks. In the midst of this atmosphere of uncertainty, an unusual event unfolded that would become known as the Battle of Los Angeles. The event began when radar operators along the California coast detected unidentified objects approaching from the ocean. In response to this perceived threat, air raid sirens wailed, and a citywide blackout was ordered. Anti-aircraft batteries were readied, and searchlights swept the skies in anticipation of an attack. Soon, the unidentified objects reached the Los Angeles area. Witnesses described them as large, glowing, and hovering in the night sky. The anti-aircraft weapons opened fire, and the night was illuminated by a barrage of artillery rounds and searchlights focused on the mysterious objects. For hours, a chaotic scene unfolded as anti-aircraft fire peppered the sky. However, despite the intense barrage, no aircraft wreckage was found, and no enemy planes were shot down. When dawn broke, it became clear that Los Angeles had not been under attack by enemy forces. The initial military response suggested that the unidentified objects were thought to be Japanese aircraft, given the heightened wartime fears. However, the official explanation provided by the US Army was that the incident had been a false alarm caused by jittery nerves and overreaction. They claimed that weather balloons and atmospheric conditions had played a role in creating optical illusions, leading to the mistaken identification of the objects. In the aftermath of the Battle of Los Angeles, skepticism arose regarding the official explanation. Some eyewitnesses insisted that the objects had not resembled weather balloons, but rather large metallic crafts. This fueled speculation that the military was concealing the true nature of the incident. Over the years, the Battle of Los Angeles has remained a subject of debate and speculation within the UFO community. Some believe that the objects were extraterrestrial in origin, while others maintain that they were top-secret military experiments or unconventional aircraft. Despite numerous investigations and official statements, the true nature of the objects remains a mystery, leaving the Battle of Los Angeles as an enduring enigma in the history of UFO encounters. Whether the UFOs were indeed mistaken for airplanes or something far more unusual, the incident continues to captivate the imagination and fuel discussions about the possibility of otherworldly encounters on Earth. Best thing to come out of this whole ordeal was a pretty cool movie of the same name, worth a watch if you're bored. And at number 2, the 1952 Washington, D.C. incident. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, most widely documented and perplexing UFO sightings in history. In July of that year, a series of sightings over the nation's capital sparked panic, military responses, and public intrigue. Amidst the Cold War and escalating tensions with the Soviet Union, the events of July 1952 only heightened the sense of unease in the United States. The saga began on July 12th, when radar operators at Washington National Airport, now known as Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, detected a cluster of unidentified flying objects moving erratically and at high speeds in restricted airspace. The prompted reports were so unusual that they prompted alerts and the scrambling of fighter jets. Over the following night, similar incidents occurred, with multiple eyewitness accounts from both civilians and military personnel. What made the 1952 Washington, D.C. sightings particularly fascinating is that the objects were frequently mistaken for airplanes. They appeared as bright lights, often described as glowing orbs, and were seen darting across the night sky in ways that defied the capabilities of conventional aircraft. Witnesses reported that the objects would suddenly change direction, hover in the sky, and then accelerate rapidly, leaving pilots and air traffic controllers completely baffled. On July 26, 1952, the situation reached its peak when numerous UFOs were once again spotted over Washington, D.C. This time, the incident garnered significant media attention and was witnessed by thousands of people. The objects flew in restricted airspace, causing the immediate suspension of air traffic and the evacuation of the control tower. In response to the public concern and increasing media coverage, the US Air Force held a press conference on July 29th, during which they explained that the sightings were likely caused by temperature inversion, which can cause radar signals to bounce off atmospheric layers and create false returns. They asserted that the visual sightings were likely due to mass hysteria. Yeah, right. However, despite these official explanations, many remain skeptical, and the 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident remains a subject of debate among UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Whether the objects were indeed the result of atmospheric phenomena or something more mysterious, the incident left an indelible mark on UFO lore, illustrating how even trained observers could mistake unconventional aerial phenomena for conventional aircraft during a time of heightened Cold War tensions. And at number 1, the Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights phenomenon of March 13, 1997 ranks among the most eerie and chilling UFO sightings in recent history. On that fateful evening, thousands of Arizonans reported witnessing a series of unexplained lights in the night sky. while many observers described the lights as being part of a massive V-shaped craft. The UFOs were thought to be airplanes due to their formation and appearance. The event unfolded after sunset, when numerous residents across Arizona, primarily in the Phoenix metropolitan area, reported seeing a formation of mysterious lights in the sky. These lights appeared to be part of a single, massive object, estimated to be over a mile in length, with witnesses describing it as a V or boomerang shape. The sheer scale and the slow, deliberate movement of the craft perplexed onlookers, leading some to believe that it was not a conventional aircraft or anything they had ever seen before. Many reported that the lights had a soft, amber, or orange glow, and some even claimed to have seen a solid dark mass within the V-shaped formation. Despite the intriguing nature of the sightings, the official explanation offered by the US Air Force was that the Phoenix lights were caused by military flares, dropped during the training exercises over the nearby Barry M. Goldwater Range. This explanation focused on a separate incident later in the evening, involving a formation of flares. According to the military, these flares illuminated the night sky and created the impression of a single massive object. However, this explanation did not satisfy many witnesses who were convinced that what they had seen earlier in the evening was not flares but a structured craft. Critics argued that flares would not account for the V-shaped formation or the consistent movement of the lights. In retrospect, the Phoenix lights remain an unsolved mystery, with some believing they were a massive otherworldly craft while others accept the military's explanation. The incident serves as a reminder of how, even in an era of advanced technology and surveillance, UFO sightings can still spark widespread public intrigue and debate, leaving us to ponder the possibility that we may not always accurately identify what we see in the night sky.
Number 5, Great Aunt Eater. Our first story today is going to be this one shared to us from Reddit, in which this user posted a thread claiming that they had been abducted by aliens and that you should ask them anything. Let's take a listen to their story and see what we think, if it holds water or if it's just a tall tale. It happened about 3 years ago in a rural part of Virginia. I don't really remember it like a real memory, but more like a dream. That being said, no, I was not asleep. I was driving home from a friend's house when it happened. I can remember vaguely what they looked like and a few other things. When my memory kicks back in, I'm sitting outside the car on the side of the road. I have never told police and I never plan on it. The aliens I remember as looking rather reptilian. They weren't your cliche big heads, gray skin, but they were bipedal. Their craft I don't rightly remember, apart from the inside being very smooth and very bright above me. It is scary to think about, but I do remember a few things they did to me. I wore a mask of some sort and they pulled hairs. There was a minute buzzing I recall and a thing over the top of my head. There were several of them. When I woke up, I was fully clothed, beside my car, on the same road I was traveling on when I last remembered. I had no scars or puncture marks or any markings, so I don't think they injected me or anything. I wasn't gone for any large amount of time, only a few hours from what I guess, and I haven't told anyone but my brother who knows me. He was just baffled and then curious. Going through the thread, the Redditor does add some minor insight on some questions, even providing a crude diagram of one of the aliens. Unfortunately, not much more detail than that is known, but isn't that the case with all stories of unknown flying objects? They're unknown for a reason. And if you're looking for way more stories of unknown flying objects, well, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some to spare. We've been doing videos on aliens for a long time, my friends. So hit subscribe so you don't miss any of that. Please make sure you ring that little bell as well, and that way you'll get every one of our videos notified to you as soon as they go up. But do that at the end of this video, because I got 4 more abduction stories for you coming right now. Number 4, Ethiopia's abduction. Alright, this next one is wild. Also from Reddit, take a little listen. In the 1960s in Ethiopia, my dad was a child at the time playing with his best friend Gabriel after school. They were playing in the fenced backyard of my dad's house. My dad turned his back for a second, then turned to look back at his friend, and Gabriel was gone. Now, it's important to note that my dad and Gabriel were both from the top 1% of Ethiopia's ruling class. My dad's father was Minister of Interior of Ethiopia, and Gabriel's father was a 4-star general of Ethiopia. The backyard Gabriel had disappeared from had 10-foot bricked walls with armed soldiers patrolling on the outside. A couple of hours pass. His parents, my dad's parents, and guards are searching, but nobody finds him. 48 hours pass. Now there's a nationwide search for this important kid. It's on the news. Police are searching door to door, describing him and what he was wearing when he disappeared. He was wearing a private school uniform. Helicopters even searched the countryside looking for him, but still nothing. A month passes, then 2. Then 4. People start losing hope that he would ever be found and think the worst. Exactly 6 months to the day he disappeared, Gabriel appears back in my dad's backyard. He looked exactly the same as when he disappeared. And this is where things start to get weird. Once they confirmed he was okay, they start asking him where he'd been. He said a couple of nice men took him on a trip. He was in a white room that glowed, and other children were there from different countries. The white glowing room had no windows, and the doors disappeared into walls. There were buttons on the walls, and if someone pushed them, a bed would come out. He was then all of a sudden in a city that was glowing and clean, but with flying cars. He said there were people there, but they looked strange like us, but different. One was a nice man who was still with him and took him to a tall building where they had to stay for a while. The man showed him a room for entertainment. Gabriel said he could push a button and the room itself would go places, including an open field, the beach, then the room itself would travel. He said after a couple hours, he was taken back to Ethiopia and appeared in the backyard. He thought he was only gone for a couple hours total. Obviously, no one believed him, and with Ethiopia being a very religious country, most adults around him thought that he had got possessed. Gabriel was even forced to see a priest to get the spirits out of him. My dad kept in contact with him. He got a doctorate in physics and I believe works in Holland these days. That's where the post concludes, but if that story is true, that sounds like one of the most wild abduction stories I've ever heard. Keeping someone for 6 months, but he thought it was just a few hours. Number 3. At an alien. I think this might be a fantasy for some of us. I know if you grew up with Halo, maybe this, seemed like a lifestyle. But take a listen to this next wild point when someone thinks they might have at an alien. Listen. A few months ago, I started having really weird dreams in which I was in a place I did not know, and I remember being really afraid. I kept it to myself for the longest time until I started noticing that I had bruising that I couldn't explain. They started on my arms and legs and then moved to my back. Most of them looked like perfect circles, like someone had poked me hard enough with an unsharpened pencil. The dreams kept coming and I started having really bad headaches. After a few weeks after the first dream, I started noticing bruising on my wife. Then one day I was in my bedroom and I noticed my pistol was out of place. I had one of those dreams the night before. So I took out the mag and I noticed there was a round missing. Now a little background here. I used to be a cop and I'm an NRA firearms instructor, so I am very familiar with firearms and I take great ensure that they are safe and ready. I asked my wife if she had touched the Glock and she said no. I took it apart and found what looked like powdered residue in the barrel. Now I started to freak out because someone had a pistol. After I found that it had been messed with, the dreams and the bruising stopped completely. I believe that my wife and I were being abducted. I further believe that it stopped after I tried to fight back and possibly at an alien in our house. I know it sounds odd, and I know I wouldn't believe it if someone else told me this story. It's part of the reason why I never tell anyone but a handful of close friends. Imagine, So you do it, you see an alien, you get abducted by one, you have this first contact moment. Not only that, but you shoot at an alien like you're Han Solo. You get to do the coolest thing any human being will ever do, and you're not even 100% sure if that happened. That is such a cruel twist of fate. Number 2, something impossible. Another one, guess from where? If you guessed Reddit, you're correct. Take a listen. I'm not sure what to think about this, but my friend who was in the car thinks it was an alien's. My friend and I were driving north from Kenosha, Wisconsin to his house about a half hour away. We had missed the on-ramp before, so we double checked that we're going the right way with my GPS. Now after a while, I notice a car has been tailgating me. I quickly matched the headlight pattern with that of an officer of the law, but my cruise control is set at the speed limit. After being nervous about this copper for about 5 minutes of following, he very suddenly changes lanes to our left and blasts past us to tailgate someone else a few lengths ahead. Now the cop freaked us out, but we were almost to our off-ramp, so we were looking for the sign, and then I see it. Welcome to Illinois. We didn't make any turns, we stayed on the freeway, and the section we were driving on didn't have any splits. There was absolutely no turning around, we were going north. But the freakiest part was I pulled over and started doing some Google Maps calculations. From the place we left, it took a half-hour driving south to get to the Illinois border. And we had started off going farther away, but it had only been 20 minutes. The landmarks we had passed going north were also more than 20 minutes away. In the time that had passed, we shouldn't have been able to see the landmarks or to drive to Illinois, even if we would have started off going south. My friend who was with me thinks it was an alien encounter. They picked us up and wanted different humans for some reason, but when they put us back, they put us on the correct freeway, only in the wrong location, facing the wrong direction. After we calmed down from our brains melting, the exact same thing happened with that same cop. We had turned around and headed back north, gotten tailed for a few minutes, and then they suddenly changed lanes to the left and blasted the accelerator to get up on somebody's bumper. Aliens? Improbable travel through time and space? Reality checkpoints? I don't have any other way to explain it. Something impossible happened to us. Oh yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time. That's just the code in the Matrix glitching out a little bit. They should have a patch ready for that next month. You won't even notice the difference. And finally, number 1. My mom tells a story of her and her friend. Let's call her Lisa. When my mom and Lisa were teenagers, they were up on the roof of Lisa's house and they see a bright light in the sky. Next thing they know, the light is gone. Thing is, they think they've been on the roof for 15 minutes, but something like 3 hours passed. Now, my mom doesn't exactly remember about what happened during that time, and Lisa simply refuses to talk about it. She would answer my mom with things like, oh, I don't know, and drop it. Now, you ever hear mom say drop it? Drop it. A couple months later, my mom moves away and loses contact with Lisa for a decade. They finally meet up, and immediately my mom notices that something odd is present about Lisa. She appears very distant, with a dreamy demeanor. After they talk for a bit, Lisa brings up the incident on the roof. My mom says she still doesn't really remember anything about it, but Lisa remembers. She remembers everything. She said that at first it was all in bits and pieces, and she couldn't remember any of it clearly. She was confused, scared, and wanted to avoid discussing it. Then, as time passed, she began to remember more of it. She remembers it all clearly, and she remembers the other 3 times she was abducted after that clearly as well. At first they paralyzed her somehow, and did all sorts of creepy experiments, but by the most recent time, no more probing, they were just talking to her. They didn't speak English or any other language, but she could understand everything they said. Apparently they told her all this stuff about space, Earth, and shockingly predicted things years beforehand, that she would get pregnant in a specific year, and it would be a stillborn, and that she would never have children again. They also told her that it was not their fault, and that they even made an attempt to save her from this, but they were unsuccessful. They said that they had abducted my mother another time after that first incident. Now my mom says she has no recollection of any other abductions, but she does have nightmares about being abducted, but she's almost sure that they're just that, nightmares. Anyway, Lisa tells my mom that every time she speaks with them, she comes to understand the divine truth more and more. When mom asks what that truth is, Lisa just says, "You'll know eventually." And she says that once she learned of the truth, everything became wonderful. Now my mom's seen her a few more times over the years, and she apparently is pretty normal. She doesn't obsess over alien stuff. She only ever brings it up in passing, so it's not a central part of her daily life. But you know, she did mention seeing the divine truth after being abducted several times, so I would say it's somewhat a part of her life.
Number 5, the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. Yes, I know I said I'd be talking about UFO sightings today, but this event is a combination sighting and abduction that I just couldn't leave off the list. So the Hills were a married couple that lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Barney was employed by the United States Postal Service, while Betty was a social worker, so pretty normal folks. They were very active in their local Unitarian congregation, members of the NAACP, and Barney sat on a local board of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, so you know, they seem like pretty normal folks. The UFO sighting happened at around 10:30 p.m. on September 19th of 1961. The Hills were driving back to their home in Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal. Just south of Lancaster, Betty noticed a bright point of light in the sky that moved from below the moon in the planet Jupiter, upwards towards the west of the moon. Now while Barney was driving, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star, but it was moving up. So because it moved erratically and was growing bigger and brighter, Betty convinced Barney to stop the car for a closer look, as well as to walk their dog, Delcy. Barney obliged and stopped at a picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. Now by this point, Betty had dug out her binoculars for a closer look, described seeing an odd-shaped aircraft flashing multicolored lights travel across the face of the moon, believing it to be a flying saucer based off of stories she had heard from her sister. Taking his turn with the binoculars, Barney thought it was just a commercial plane at first, but soon changed his mind because without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction, causing him to realize something was wrong. The Hills said they continued driving on the isolated road, moving very slowly through Franconia Notch in order to observe the object as it came even closer. At one point, the object passed above a restaurant and signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the old man of the mountain. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of a granite cliff profile. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was around 40 feet long, and that it seemed to be rotating. At one point, the object descended rapidly towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the hill's 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, Barry stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object, which he later said was roughly the size of a huge pancake. And that statement right there just made me a little hungry. I love pancakes. Still using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him. In his report to investigator Walter Webb of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP for short, Barney described specifically that the beings were somehow not human. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent aircraft approached what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and around 300 feet away from him. Not arriving home until dawn, the Hills stated that they had some odd sensations and impulses they couldn't explain. Now, extremely confused, the Hills said they tried to reconstruct what exactly happened, because notice I just sort of fragmented there, but their memories were also incomplete and fragmented. Now, the rest of the night, the Hills have no idea. They didn't arrive home until after dawn, and they had some odd sensations and impulses they couldn't explain. And they're very extremely confused, and they tried to reconstruct what happened, but their memories were... After sleeping for a couple of hours, Betty awoke and placed the shoes and clothing that she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, the zipper, and the lining, and later noticed a pinkish powder on the dress. Now, over the years, 5 different laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analyses, and they got nothing. Now, this wasn't the only damage to items in their possession. Barney said that the leather strap for the binoculars was torn, but couldn't remember how. The toes of his shoes were scraped, their watches were broken, and no matter what, they never worked again. There were shiny concentric circles, similar to the rings one would find on a tree trunk, on the car's trunk that had not been there the previous day. Now, Betty and Barney experimented with a compass. Notice that when they moved it towards the spots, the needles would whirl rapidly, but when they moved it a few inches away from the shiny spots, it would drop down. 10 days after the UFO encounter, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams, which continued for 5 successive nights. She stated that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity that she had never had before. After the 5th night, they stopped and never recurred, though they occupied her thoughts during the day. Determined to recover their lost memories, the Hills opted to partake in hypnosis sessions. Barney recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but afterwards he felt compelled to pull it off the road and drive into the woods, eventually spotting 6 men standing on the dirt road. The car stalled and 3 of the men approached the car, telling Barney not to fear them. Okay. He was still anxious. No kidding. And reported that the leader told him to close his eyes. While hypnotized, Barney said, "I felt like the eyes had been pushed into my eyes," a statement he would repeat each session. The best anyone has been able to rebut what happened was claiming stress and sleep deprivation as the cause of what they saw and experienced. I'll admit, I'm usually much more of a skeptic, but this seems pretty dang real to me. Number 4, an Alabama spotting. This tale comes from a lovely lady named Lana and took place in Bose, Alabama back in July of 2014. It was around 10:30 at night. Lana and her friend were sitting on her friend's deck, enjoying a late night beverage of the non-alcoholic kind. And her friend exclaimed, "Look!" And Lana looked up in time to see a rectangular shaped object with lights circling around it, constantly changing colors. The duo found themselves repeating, "What is that?" in reference to, the obvious UFO. It briefly went dark and then reappeared, moving towards the property. Now, this house is situated at an elevation of 1,053 feet above sea level and features a very steep drop off at the edge of the lawn, which is heavily wooded all the way down the mountain. The UFO was hovering just above the very tall trees, and as it moved closer and closer to the friends, a small semicircular shaped object was seen below the larger object. Lana grabbed her cell phone and began taking photos of what they were seeing. It came close enough to the lawn to reflect lying onto the grass before straightening itself out and flying at a speed Lana had never seen anything move at, and completely out of sight behind the trees. The large object began getting very bright, with almost fiery looking lights shooting out of the ring where the multicolored lights were first observed. They watched it for what seemed like a short period of time, but later realized they'd been out there watching for about an hour and a half. Lana has no direct memory of the object leaving or blinking out, just being gone, and began to take photos all around in hopes of finding where it went, being able to take a poor photo of what seemed to be 2 little creatures that we have. In addition to the UFOs, another glowing light appeared deep down in the woods. It would brighten when Lana talked to it, and then dim and brighten again on request. Her camera never recorded a photo of this object, although she's adamant that she snapped them repeatedly. Which I get. Phone cameras are a little bit flighty at times. Lana's friend said once while watching the object she was going to get a flashlight and go out there and look more closely, but refrained from doing so when Lana advised otherwise after getting weird vibes from the unknown, which thank goodness they refrained. Who knows what could have happened. Number 3, an insectoid race? This story comes courtesy of a man named Rob Holstein and took place somewhere outside of the USA for once. Zigai, Cyprus. I tried my best. It's another recent account, having happened on April 20th of 2016 at around 8:30 at night. Rob and two of his friends had just finished their meal and were out in the garden talking, and after a moment of silence, a friend pointed out an unusually bright star moving across the sky, assuming it may have been like a comet or something. After a brief moment, Rob looked up to realize that it was stationary at around 75 to 100 feet above the tree line, and sat there, staring at whatever this was in complete shock. Every 15 seconds or so, it would lower its altitude until it was only a couple of feet from the treetops, and weirdly, absolutely no noise had been emitted from the UFO, which kind of par for the course. Rob tried getting out of his chair to scurry inside, but felt an overwhelming feeling of paralysis. Ditto for his friend. He turned to her to ask her what was going on, but she looked frozen in fear. After what felt like hours, something appeared from around the trees underneath the triangular craft. It was a humanoid figure, with a head similar to that of an ant and skin like a crocodile. It had extremely small eyes in proportion to its head, and long, thin appendages, walking right up to the fence before sharply turning and sprinting into the darkness of the trees. After a brief moment of complete fear, dread, and anxiousness, the craft moved in a linear path towards the west, before becoming no longer visible, and the feeling of paralysis slowly faded away from the friends. Thank goodness. Number 2, aliens just wanna have fun. Time to travel back in time to August of 1994 in Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin. Now this story was reported anonymously, so I'll call our editor Edward for funsies. It was a summer night. He was driving around with his buddies for fun when they came up to a stop sign and noticed that there were what they thought to be young folks playing on the swing sets at the grade school, but when they pulled up to the playground, everyone had disappeared. Edward pulled up into the Horseshoe Drive all the way, and that's when they saw what he described as the outline of a white UFO with 2 white lights at the end of each wingtip, hovering above the tree line. Everyone in the car started to scream and holler, like go, 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 go. And then the third light lit up in a bright orange color, almost like an eye pupil dilating. Edward floored the gas pedal and raced away. And by that point, everyone in the vehicle was in some state of hysterics. The group went to a friend's house, and the friend whose house it was told her dad about it. He grabbed a flashlight and the group was going back. The dad even went to the woods but found nothing before returning home, and the friend group ventured to a local pizza place, told other friends about it, and drew pictures of what they saw to compare, and what do you know? They drew the same thing. Later that night, when the pizza place was closing, Edward ventured outside to start the car, but it was making a horrible noise, similar to if one were turning the ignition when the car was already running. His friend's brother opened the hood and unhooked the battery, and Edward decided to leave the car at the pizza place and walk home in fear. Over the next few days, he had heard that there were other sightings within a few mile radius, all taking place near water, which supports my theory about alien ships needing water to control their crafts. Number 1, Salem isn't just for witches. Captured on the morning of August 3rd of 1952, this creepy photo appears to show 4 unidentified flying objects hovering across the skies of Salem, Massachusetts. We know that the photographer's name was Shell Alpert, and that it was taken at Salem's Coast Guard Air Station, and that the objects were spotted above the Winter Island and Cat Cove areas, but little else is known about this bizarre image. Some have claimed that the lights are simply reflections in the window through which it was taken. Others point to incidents throughout the 1950s in which supposedly similar crafts were seen. It's pretty par for the course that information is missing and unknown in this case, since that's what the government enjoys doing when it comes to credible alien and UFO spottings, in attempts to cover them up, but I know otherwise. And that brings us to the end of our time, and suddenly I don't miss seeing stars in the sky as much as I used to, now that my brain is racing about what ifs.
Number 5, flying cigars. Okay, so the first piece of footage we're gonna take a look at today is this amazing footage of a cylindrical UFO that's got even the skeptics and the experts scratching their heads watching. Now you come take a look and see if this makes you a true believer. You can see pretty clearly, unlike most UFO footage, there is something very strange in clear view. Now we see a lot of videos or stories about cylindrical UFOs, but we don't often get to see them so up close, so stabilized, so enhanced until this beautiful little clip. Now there's a couple things going on here that make this clip a little shinier than the average clip. For one, we can see the objects going behind the clouds, some low visibility there. The object shimmers with a metallic surface. It looks seamless, as if it's one solid capsule or a big giant pill. But most interestingly to me, it doesn't show any sign of propulsion. No trail of smoke, no exhaust, no big old rocket on the back. So what is driving it forward? The object is seen making multiple sharp turns at very, very high speeds, instant acceleration. So whatever is making it move is tremendously powerful. Perhaps there's some sort of fantastic anti-gravity technology that's keeping it up in the air. Now the original uploader said that this object, despite its incredible speed, made no sonic boom, when it definitely should have been. Viewers who are significantly better with numbers than me suggest that the object is going around 8 1,800 kilometers per hour. So what do you think, my dear sweet viewers? Is this some of the most compelling footage of a UFO in a while, or is this big strange pill craft just a big pill to swallow? You let me know down below. And if you're looking for way more alien content, well, you already know the Top 5 Scary has some of that and then some. We have got boxes and boxes full of alien videos for you to peruse and enjoy. But if alien videos aren't your jam, we've got a video on just about everything scary under the sun and above it. So click on through, make sure you hit subscribe, please hit that little bell, but do that at the end of this video, okay? Because I got 4 more alien sightings coming for you right now. Number 4, the mysterious triangle. Now, it wouldn't be a proper list of mysterious UFO sightings without a classic sighting of a triangular black UFO. If you're a regular enthusiast of UFO content, you probably recognize that black triangle UFOs are one of the most repeated sightings, right after those cylindrical cigar-shaped Tic Tac UFOs we just covered. Now, this next clip you're about to see was sourced from TikTok by the account TR3B Black Manta YT and was stabilized and enhanced by other members of the UFO community to highlight the clip, and we're glad they did because this is about to blow your mind. Take a look. Now, a very popular conspiracy theory in the sort of UFO stratosphere is that the existence of these black triangular crafts are traced back to a purported top secret aircraft developed by the US military, codenamed as the TR-3 Black Manta, hence the name of the TikTok account we sourced this from. Now, the alleged Black Manta is a classified stealth reconnaissance plane capable of vertical takeoff and landing, as well as extraordinary maneuverability. It's believed that it's got supremely advanced propulsion systems and radar evading technologies, allowing it to operate undetected. Now, believers in this theory state that sightings of black triangular UFOs are sightings of this classified aircraft, and that the government uses UFO conspiracies as a way to divert attention away from their covert operations. Now, not to get too tinfoily, but that sounds incredibly likely. There are some who believe as well that the TR-3 could be proof of a UFO, implying that the craft was reverse engineered from downed or otherwise recovered alien technology. Obviously, the government isn't going to outright confirm or deny anything vis-a-vis aliens, especially any top secret black ops level secrets, so officially the government has denied any involvement about a possible TR-3 Black Manta project. So what do you think, my viewers? Are these sightings of black triangle UFOs sightings of advanced military technology from this world or from someone else's? Number 3, the lights over Vegas. Coming up next today on this list is going to be this strange footage out of Las Vegas. Sometimes what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas and blows up the internet, like this series of mysterious bright lights that hovered above the city for hours, being seen by countless people, and yet no one seems to be able to figure out what it was. Now, often the bright glow of something like this could be traced to flares or aviation training. That was the hypothesis put forward by the local news station that aired this clip, suggesting it could be activity from Nellis Air Force Base, Creech Air Force Base, or Harry Reid International. When someone from the station reached out to Nellis, a spokesperson told the station that no training was conducted over the valley the previous night, and a similar statement was made by Harry Reid International. But come on, I don't need you to be a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist to tell you that the government is not going to own up to that. Even if you caught them with a big, clear, crisp photo of an alien craft, they'd still say they had nothing to do with that. It doesn't seem overly likely that if the government was conducting clandestine ops, they'd be so forthright in telling people about them anyway, so still an option, I'd say. Moving forward, the person who filmed these mysterious lights said that he's a local to the strip, and that he said that these lights looked unlike anything he had ever seen before up in the sky there. Much bigger and brighter than any tourist helicopters or the usual glitz and lights and attractions from the Vegas skyline. The lights apparently burned really brightly for about 5 minutes or so, and then vanished again as they appeared. Now, the areas around Las Vegas are ripe for conspiracy, what with Area 51 being pretty close by. Could it be possible that these lights we saw were in fact high-tech military technology? Could they be reverse engineered alien technology? Or could it just be a bunch of geese that all had Christmas lights wrapped around them? We may honestly never know. Number 2, the flying saucer over Phoenix. Coming up next today in our collection of UFO footage collected by average Joes on the ground is this sighting from Phoenix, Arizona of what looks to be a pretty clear-cut flying saucer flying sideways through the sky. Now, we've seen a cylinder, we've seen a triangle, and we've seen a series of strange floating floating lights, so I think it's high time that we round out the collection of UFO footage by adding in a flying saucer, the most classic of all UFO sightings. You close your eyes, you imagine a UFO, you probably imagine a little flying saucer, a little glass bubble, a little green guy in there. In this clip, we can see some vaguely disc, saucer-like effigy hurtling through the sky at a rapid speed. Now, unfortunately, this clip is a bit older and came at a time before 4K cameras were the norm, and so we can downright count the pixels on the screen. It's like a vintage throwback. It's hard to make out exactly what's happening in the clip, and the details of it are a bit muddled. It would be great to be able to see the craft in more detail and make out some of the individual elements of it just to prove or disprove anything. More than a few commenters when this clip was posted suggested that it could just be a balloon, which would definitely be a bit of a bubble burster. I feel like a balloon is the answer to 99.9% of all UFO sightings. It's just a strange balloon that got loose. Now, I can see some elements of that in some shots. The craft looks like it's reacting to the wind more than it does being blown around rather than soaring through the sky. As well, there's no visible exhaust or method of propulsion shown, but it could be possible that whatever entity was piloting that craft has technology above and beyond what we could ever dream of and has no need for propulsion. So what do you think? Proof of an alien civilization scouting out the planet caught on camera by someone looking up at just the right time? Or is this just a balloon that needs some hot air let out of it? And number one, the balls of fire in La Plata. And finally, coming in at the number one spot today in this list of amateur alien auteur films is this strange footage captured recently in La Plata, Argentina. Two fireballs were seen hovering in the sky, which is that's pretty odd, all things considered. They appeared seemingly out of thin air in the night sky and remained hovering in place for 5 minutes or more. It's strange that 5 minutes seems to be the key amount of time that fireballs hang up in the sky. At the time of the sighting of the fireballs, there were no storms, it's a clear night, and these fiery red flares light up the night sky like they're gigantic evil eyes staring down at us. Very imposing. We could see tons and tons of people coming out to take photos and gawk and try to figure out what was happening, so this isn't a one-off camera glitch or someone getting crafty with CGI. We've got loads of eyewitnesses accounting for this. Now, some skeptics have suggested that this could be rocket vapor or something left over from a Starlink operation. Now, maybe it's because I'm not a rocket scientist, I'm just a YouTube host, sort of, but I'm not convinced. Many reports flooded in around this one particular incident, with residents all describing them as shining fireballs in the night sky. Well, local government tried to come forward with an explanation, believing that it came from a petrochemical plant, with the leading explanation being that the flames were from two catalytic units in the plant, causing a flare for a short period of time. Now, despite that being the official story, there are of course still some skeptics who think that's just a convenient cover-up to prevent local residents from getting their hands too close to the actual truth, with some locals claiming they've seen lights from the plant before and they're never that bright or that high up in the night sky. So, like all the other ones, I will leave it up to you. These mysterious balls of flame, something about aliens or something not about aliens? It really could be either one of those options or nothing. Anyway, something to consider.
Number 5, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali is widely known as the greatest boxer and as an American activist. He sadly passed away in 2016. Muhammad reported having several experiences in which he cited extraterrestrial phenomena. He claimed to have seen a massive UFO mothership and that he was watched by extraterrestrials. Timothy Green Beckley wrote a book containing celebrity UFO sightings. Ali was quoted many times within the book, including the quote, "I happened to look up just before dawn, as I often do while running, and there, hovering above us, was this brilliant light hanging as if by an invisible thread. At first I thought it was a beacon projected from a helicopter, but moments later, a similar object passed in front of us." He said that the second UFO had a glowing red trail behind it. He mentioned the flying objects to his trainer, who was nearby. The pair watched the objects appear from behind the skyline and then fly overhead for about 15 minutes. Ali noted that there had actually been other UFO sightings in the area that same night, including a report from a pilot preparing to land at the Newark airport. The chapter of Beckley's book surrounding Ali contains many sightings. Ali claimed to have experienced 16 sightings. Ali believed that UFOs had been watching him for quite some time. He said that in the early morning he could see them in the sky, playing tag. He recalled, "The closest one happened when a cigar-shaped ship hovered briefly over a car I was a passenger in one night, driving north on the New Jersey Turnpike. What a sight that was. We could see the shadow made by the UFO as it passed over the pavement of the road in the light of the full moon. The author and Muhammad Ali met many times. Beckley stated that Ali seemed to enjoy speaking of UFOs, adding that he was a stone-cold believer. There was no question to him about whether they were real or not. Muhammad had seen a UFO at his training camp in the Poconos Mountains. He had seen a light coming down towards the mountains and hovering above the valley. The UFO was shaped like a cigar, but blunt on both ends. He couldn't see any windows, but he was certain that there were beings on board. The next night, the ship returned, and this time his companion was able to catch a glimpse of the ship as well. Muhammad Ali was an amazing, smart, and kind man. His claims of UFO sightings are supported by other witnesses and by his honest, hardworking personality. Number 4. Plutarch. Plutarch was a Greek-turned-Roman historian. According to Plutarch, this sighting would take place in 74 BCE, prior to a planned battle. The army of the Roman Empire was marching on the armor of King of Pontus in the region of Phrygia, in the region of Phrygia, where Turkey now stands. However, the two armies never met due to a large flame descending from the sky in between the two marching sides. The two armies took the fiery blaze as a warning sign and decided not to fight. The armies separated and everyone was spared from a battle. Plutarch wrote of the event, which was allegedly cited by thousands of people, describing the fiery object as a molten silver-colored object that resembled a bottle of wine. Many people have since attempted to theorize the origin of the object. People have theorized that the object was a falling meteorite, or something of that nature. But NASA scientist Richard Stuthers explained why it may not have been a meteorite as part of a 2007 antiquity study. He reasons that the molten silver color doesn't quite line up with what scientists would expect to see during a meteor event. People have also been reminded to take the knowledge that ancient civilizations had about astrological phenomena into account, including a long history of recorded meteorite events. If what the armies had seen that day was a meteor, they would have been able to recognize it as such. But according to Plutarch, they didn't, which leaves the origin of the wine-shaped object a mystery. Plutarch, though a credible historian, has been known to emphasize the moral lessons of history, sometimes at the expense of accuracy. Some believe that the passage written was an allegory, used to relay a message about war, and it was not to be taken literally. But the fact that this phenomenon was witnessed by thousands of soldiers adds to the credibility and mystery behind the event. Number 3. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was a king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon. He spent most of his years conducting a military campaign throughout Western Asia and Egypt. In 329 BCE, Alexander the Great led his army in a conquest to conquer the known world. As he and his army were preparing to cross the Indus River, Alexander and all of his troops watched in awe as two great shining silvery shields spitting fire from around the rims emerged from the skies. The two shields allegedly dove at his army until the elephants, horses, and men were too scared to cross the river where the terrifying incident had occurred. The two flying shields disappeared back into the skies with just as much haste as they had appeared with. 7 years later, while Alexander and his army were attacking a Venetian city in the Mediterranean, both his army and the opposing army witnessed two objects materialize in the sky. One of the objects shot a powerful beam of light at a city wall, which crumbled it to dust. The flying objects appeared, and Alexander's army was able to quickly seize the city, thanking the objects for a helpful contribution of the conquering. Many historians discredit the events as false retellings of an egotistical man, but others dispute them, questioning why the events would even be documented as a part of history if it were untrue. The ancient world has dozens of recorded sightings of extraterrestrial phenomena. Number 2. John Lennon. On August 23rd of 1974, while in New York, John Lennon reported sighting a UFO. He claimed to have seen a UFO slowly and silently flying overhead. John had been laying in his bed and decided to head out to the balcony for an evening cigarette. While he was smoking, he looked up at the sky and noticed odd lights flashing. When he turned around, he saw a large circular flying object flying silently, dark in color and adorned with white pulsating lights around the rim and one red light on top. He called for his girlfriend, May Pang, who joined John on the balcony and saw the same object overhead. She began to shout, "It's a UFO!" The object seemed to be about 2 or 3 stories above them and just nearly cleared the building next to them. The saucer moved at a slow pace before turning sideways and floating down the river. Then it hovered above a building before heading to another part of the city. After stopping at a bridge, it flew quickly up to the sky. During this point in his life, many thought that he may be insane. But May Pang reported that he was not crazy and that she witnessed the sighting as well. The sighting was also reported by many other New York citizens at the time. John Lennon references this experience in the song Nobody Told Me, writing, "There's UFOs over New York and I ain't too surprised." Number 1. Titus Livius, or Livy. Titus Livy is regarded as one of the most accomplished historians of ancient times. Though his histories do have some mythical influence, his work, The History of Rome, is credited as one of the leading reasons that people today have such a great understanding of ancient Rome. Livy covered the civilization's history, from its founding in 753 BCE all the way to 9 BCE. Though his work has some strange passages, none are as strange as his recollection of the events that took place throughout the Second Punic War. Livy described many sightings of phantom ships flying over the battles in the skies. The first reported instance was in 218 BCE, in the first year of the war. Livy wrote that phantom ships had been gleaming over the sky in Rome. The next year, he wrote that round shields were seen in the sky, but over the city of Arpi. He recorded another sighting of another UFO in 173 BCE as a great fleet of many ships in the sky, flying overhead near the ancient city of Lenovium. Many have commented on the similarity of the ancient description of flying saucers offered by Livy and the modern-day depictions of flying saucers. Though Livy lived 150 years after the events of the battle, his position as an extremely trusted historian means that his records are widely viewed as accurate and trustworthy. Many people are skeptical about his writings surrounding phantom ships, but his work is regarded as true due to the source of his information. His source was a thoroughly fact-checked and verified archive which was set up during the Roman Republic. A lot of people like to discredit sightings, saying that they're a result of video doctoring or caused by the fast-moving nature of today's media. The fact that sightings have been reported for thousands of years reminds people that extraterrestrial theories are not anything new. They've been around for centuries.
In 5th place, we have the 2004 series of spottings. On November 14th of 2004, Lieutenant Alex Dietrich was piloting her FA-18 Super Hornet when she observed an oblong object hovering over the water. It leapt into motion, skimming 500 to 1,000 feet over the waves at around 500 knots. The fighter jet's onboard radar couldn't detect the object, but Alex's weapons system operator in the rear seat, whose name is not public, witnessed it as well. Alex has quoted her recollection as, "We were trying to call out what we were seeing to each other, and to make sure everybody else is seeing it, it's moving so erratically and so fast that our voices, our minds, and our radio calls just can't keep up with it." Now, the majority of credible modern-day UFO sightings, ergo why it's on this list, can be credited to those that work in the Air Force, and it should be noted that military pilots specifically are trained at what they call REAS, short for reconnaissance, and referring more specifically in this case to the art of recognizing aircrafts by their shapes, paint schemes, unit insignia, and more. On one of the other Super Hornets that launched behind Alex was Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, who was able to capture the object on an infrared camera. It was around 40 feet long, round and smooth, and quickly received the nickname Tic Tac. Now, all of the footage that the US government has confirmed as authentic and unexplained speak for itself, since I know we have the clip handy. Around this time, starting on November 10th to be exact, Gary Voorhees, a petty officer on the USS Princeton guided missile cruiser, had been reporting apparitions on his radar screens in the same area, triple checking his equipment before he made his report, and being the main technician responsible for that equipment, along with having 6 years of Navy experience at the time, Voorhees described what he was seeing as impossible. In just seconds, an object had dropped to the waterline from 60,000 feet, hovered, and then zipped away at high velocity, making right-angle turns that were quoted as being confounding and defying gravity. I'm not Elphaba. The objects returned for the next week, with Voorhees quoted as saying, "I was able to see it on the horizon during the night and during the day, and it definitely was a glowing object. Could I tell you for 100% certainty what it was exactly we were tracking? No." Now, footage of this event used to exist, with Gary being able to vividly describe his memories, but has since been completely scrubbed from the internet. Just gonna give the Pentagon my usual dose of side-eye right about now. Don't mind me. In 4th place, we have the Washington Flap. At 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19th of 1952, Edward Nugent, an air traffic controller at the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, try saying that 5 times fast, spotted 7 objects on his radar. The objects were around 24 kilometers south-southwest of the city, not following any established flight paths, and no known aircrafts were in the area. Edward's superior, Harry Barnes, a senior air traffic controller at the airport, watched the objects on the radar scope. later writing that they knew immediately that a very strange situation existed. Their movements were completely radical compared to those of any ordinary aircraft. Harry had 2 controllers check Edward's radar, and they found it was working normally. He then called the National Airport's radar-equipped control tower, and the controllers there said that they also had unidentified blips on their radar screen and saw a hovering, bright light in the sky that was moving at speeds they couldn't understand. At this point, other objects appeared in all sectors of the radar scope, and when they moved over the White House and the United States Capitol, Harry then called the Andrews Air Force Base, which was located around 10 miles away. Although they reported that they had no unusual objects on their radar, an airman soon called the base's control tower to report the sighting of a strange object. Airman William Brady, who was in the tower, saw an object which appeared to be like an orange ball of fire, trailing a tail, saying it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Where have I said that already? As William tried to alert the other personnel in the tower, the strange object took off at an unbelievable speed. On one of the National Airport's runways, pilot S.C. Pierman was waiting in the cockpit of his plane for permission to take off. After spotting what he believed to be a meteor, he was told that the control tower's radar had detected unknown objects closing in on his position. Pierman observed 6 objects that he described as white, tailless, fast-moving lights over a 14-minute period. He was in radio contact with Harry during his sighting, and Harry later reported that each sighting coincided with a pip that could be seen near his plane. When he reported that the light streaked off at a high speed, it disappeared on the scope. Meanwhile, back at the Andrews Air Force Base, Staff Sergeant Charles Davenport observed an orange-red light to the south where the light would appear to stand still, then make an abrupt change in direction and altitude, with the phenomena happening over several times. At one point, both radar centers at National Airport and the radar at Andrews Air Force Base were tracking an object hovering over a radio beacon. The object vanished in all 3 radar centers at the same time. At 3 a.m., shortly before 2 United States Air Force F-94 Starfire jet fires from Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware arrived over Washington, all of the objects vanished from the radar at National Airport. However, when the jets ran low on fuel and left, the objects returned, which convinced Harry that the UFOs were monitoring radio traffic and behaving accordingly. The objects were last detected by radar at 5:30 a.m. Now, the government later tried dismissing the events of that day on a temperature blip, but those who were present have been adamant otherwise. In 3rd place, we have the Go Faster video. The video, uploaded by the UFO investigative group to the STARS Academy of Arts and Sciences in March of 2018, was secured by a Freedom of Information Act request to the US government. The video was taken in 2015 off of the East Coast by an FA-18F fighter jet using the aircraft's onboard Raytheon AN/ASQ-228 Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod, also known as the ATF-LIR. I know myself too well. I'll trip over my tongue if I try saying that any more than I just did, so it shall be called ATF for short. It's not the official short form, but work with me here. ATF is designed to allow pilots to track, target, and destroy targets on the ground at ranges of up to 40 miles. It should be noted that ATF is good at spotting, but not engaging aerial targets. Now, this video, nicknamed Go Fast by To The Stars, starts by explaining the various numbers and symbols that appear in the footage. You know, things like the aircraft's altitude, which was around 25,000 feet, and the fact that the ATF was pointed ahead and to the left of the Super Hornet. The readout also explains that the aircraft was traveling at 252 knots and in a 5-degree turn, and the unknown object was approximately 4.4 nautical miles away. The video shows the Super Hornet's weapons system operator repeatedly trying to acquire the UFO with the ATF's built-in auto tracker, which can pick out an object and keep it centered on camera. After 2 tries, the weapons system officer, or WSO for short, shouts, "Whoa, got it!" To which another person assumed to be the pilot says, "Woohoo! Whoa! What the bleep is that thing?" the pilot asks. The WSO later says, "Oh my gosh, dude." To which the pilot replies, "Whoa, what is that, man?" Now, this is where the skeptics would start asking, but Alexa, how is this unknown object different from, weird government aircrafts we don't know about? Well, doubters, let me count thy ways. For starters, the UFO doesn't have any kind of hot exhaust trail that would be emitted by a conventional turbine engine, appearing to emit, no heat on the ATF sensor. And secondly, the UFO doesn't have any visible wings or fins. Through my research, I've learned that even cruise missiles, such as the American Tomahawk, have small winglets that should be visible, and other missiles, such as the Maverick anti-tank missile, still have little stubby fins. The UFO appears oval-like and does not appear to fly nose first in the direction of travel. To quote from one of my favorite films, "Take that, Mr. Doubting Mustafa." In 2nd place, we have the Aguadilla UAP. Jonathan Lace, spokesman for the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU for short, explains that the organization believes the most compelling footage of anomalous activity ever taken was by a Homeland Security aircraft over Puerto Rico on April 25th of 2013. I'll let you folks make up your own minds in the comments. But let's get at it. The video was captured at around 9:20 p.m. on that fateful day as an unknown object flew across the runway of the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla and was caught on infrared camera by a U.S. Customs and Border Protection aircraft, the footage of which was leaked to the SCU by an anonymous source. The eerie footage shows an object believed to be up to 5 feet in length, moving at speeds of up to 120 miles per hour, get close to the ground before seemingly plunging into the ocean and splitting into two. In a 50-page report, the SCU has made notes that no bird, no balloon, no aircraft, and no known drones have that capability. It also appears to not disturb the water when plunging beneath and then re-emerging from the surface, a phenomenon known as trans-medium travel. SCU investigators said that the object appears to be of unknown origin after spending 1,000 hours researching the UAP in question. It is claimed that the pilots of a DHC-8 turboprop spotted a red light over the ocean. They then contacted the control tower, who told them they did not know the identity of the object, and then the object's lights went out as it approached the shore. The plane then engaged its thermal imaging camera and went on to follow the UAP. The SCU report concluded by saying that the video is the best documentation of an unknown aerial and submerged nautical object exhibiting advanced technology they've ever seen. They have since called for the release of more data from the Pentagon after the release of the Tic Tac, Gimbal, and Go Fast videos. In their statement, the SCU says that they believe that all government data regarding unidentified aerospace objects should be made available to the public to be openly investigated by the broader scientific community, provided that such data does not compromise sources or methods of data collection. Now, a full scientific investigation of such data would be able to uncover valuable information relating to both national security and advancement of our understanding of physics, aerospace engineering, and, our world and beyond. Here's to hoping the Pentagon listens someday and releases that footage. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. They just really need to stop being so cagey about what they release. They really don't release information unless they're forced to, and while I hate sounding like a broken record, they need to do better. And in first place, we have the Chicago O'Hare Airport sighting. At around 4:15 p.m. on November 7th of 2006, federal authorities at Chicago O'Hare's International Airport received a report that a group of 12 airport employees were witnessing a metallic, saucer-shaped craft hovering over gate C-17. The object was first spotted by a ramp employee who was pushing back United Airlines Flight 446, which was departing Chicago for Charlotte, North Carolina. The employee made the flight's crew aware of the mysterious object above their aircraft, and this unknown craft was also witnessed by, pilots, airline management, and mechanics, so a lot of people. No air traffic controllers saw the object though, and it didn't show up on radar. Witnesses described the object as completely silent, 6 to 24 feet in diameter, and dark gray in color. Several independent witnesses outside of the airport also saw this object. One described, seeing a disc-shaped craft hovering over the airport, stating that it was obviously not clouds since the object shot through the clouds at a high velocity, leaving a clear blue hole in the cloud layer, which closed itself shortly after the events. According to a reporter at the Chicago Tribune, the disc was visible for approximately 5 minutes and was seen by close to a dozen United Airlines employees, ranging from, pilots and supervisors who heard chatter on the radio and raced out to see it. Both United Airlines and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA for short, initially denied that they had any information on this sighting until the Chicago Tribune filed a Freedom of Information Act request. The FAA then ordered an internal review of air traffic communications tapes to comply with the request, which, what do you know, uncovered a call by the United supervisor to an FAA manager in the airport tower concerning the UFO sighting. If I haven't made myself obvious by now, I hate cover-ups, so I'm glad the Freedom of Information request was rightfully granted. UFO investigators have argued that the FAA's refusal to look into the incident contradicts the agency's mandate to investigate possible security breaches at American airports, such as in this case. The National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena published a 155-page report on the sighting and has called for government inquiry and, improved energy sensing techniques, because if an airborne object can hover for several minutes over a busy airport but not be registered on radar or seen visually from the control tower, this creates a potential threat to human safety.